Emma Carter had always lived a quiet life. She wasn't the kind of person who craved attention or luxury. She was content with simplicity. But today she wanted something special, something that would remind her mother, who had spent years raising Emma alone while battling illness, that they were finally okay, that their hard days were behind them. It was a sunny Saturday morning when Emma stepped into the gleaming glass doors of Prestige Motors, one of the most exclusive car dealerships in the city. The showroom sparkled under the fluorescent lights. Rows of high-end vehicles lined up like trophies on display. Emma felt out of place almost immediately, her plain white blouse and faded jeans standing stark against the polished suits of the salespeople milling around. She walked hesitantly toward a sleek silver sedan, running her fingers lightly over its smooth surface. It wasn't extravagant, it was practical, elegant, and just within her budget after months of saving every penny from her job at the cafe. A young man in an impeccably tailored suit approached her, his smile as polished as the cars around him. "Can I help you?" he asked, though his tone suggested he already doubted she belonged there. "Yes," Emma replied softly, trying to steady her voice. "I'm interested in this model. Could you tell me more about it?" The salesman glanced down at her worn sneakers and lack of designer accessories. His smile faltered slightly before he said, "Of course." However, he paused, leaning closer as if sharing confidential information. "This particular vehicle is quite exclusive. Are you sure it's within your price range?" Emma blinked, caught off guard by the directness of his question. "Yes," she said firmly, straightening her posture. "I've saved for this. I'd like to test drive it." The salesman chuckled dismissively, shaking his head. "Look, sweetheart, we cater to a very specific clientele here. People who can afford these kinds of luxuries. Maybe you should try somewhere else, a used car lot, perhaps." Emma's cheeks burned with embarrassment. She opened her mouth to protest but stopped herself, realizing it wouldn't matter. This man had already decided she didn't belong. Without another word, she turned and left the dealership, her heart pounding with anger and shame. Outside, she leaned against the wall, tears threatening to spill over. "I'll show them," she whispered to herself, her fists clenched tightly at her side. Later that evening, Emma returned home to find Ryan sitting on the couch, scrolling through his phone. Ryan Carter was everything Emma wasn't: confident, commanding, and wealthy beyond imagination. Yet despite his success, he carried himself with humility, never flaunting his riches or treating others as beneath him. They had met months ago when Ryan visited the cafe where Emma worked. Their connection had been instant, built on mutual respect and admiration. To Emma, Ryan was her rock, the person who made her feel seen and valued. "How was your day?" Ryan asked, looking up from his phone with a warm smile. Emma hesitated, unsure whether to share what had happened. She didn't want to burden him or seem petty, but the memory of the salesperson's condescending smirk lingered fresh in her mind. Finally, she sighed and told him everything: the humiliation, the dismissal, the way she'd felt so small in that opulent showroom. Ryan listened intently, his expression darkening with each detail. When Emma finished, he placed his phone on the table and took her hands in his. "Emma," he said gently, "you deserve better than that. You deserve respect, no matter where you go or what you wear." Though touched by his words, Emma shrugged. "It's fine, really. I'll just forget about it." But Ryan wasn't going to let it slide, not this time. Early the next morning, Ryan made some calls. By noon, the entire city was buzzing with news of a mysterious event unfolding outside Prestige Motors. Reporters gathered, cameras rolling, as a long black limousine pulled up to the curb. Moments later, a dazzling Rolls Royce Phantom emerged behind it, its chrome accents gleaming in the sunlight. The license plate read Ryan 1. Out stepped Ryan Carter himself, dressed in a perfectly tailored navy blue suit. His presence commanded attention. Even the reporters fell silent as he strode confidently toward the dealership entrance. Behind him trailed a team of investigators, lawyers, and PR representatives, all part of Ryan's plan to expose the truth. Inside, chaos erupted. Customers stared in awe as Ryan entered, his gaze fixed on the same salesperson who had humiliated Emma the day before. The man paled visibly, recognizing the billionaire instantly. Before he could speak, Ryan held up a hand to silence him. "I understand you refused service to my wife yesterday," Ryan began, his voice calm yet authoritative. The room went still. Not only did you judge her based on her appearance, but you also violated basic principles of decency and professionalism. Care to explain yourself?" The salesperson stammered, sweat beading on his forehead. "Sir, I didn't know she was your wife. If I had known, that's exactly the problem," Ryan interrupted sharply. "You treated her poorly because of assumptions you made about her worth. Let me make one thing clear. Wealth doesn't define someone's value. Respect should be universal." As the crowd murmured in agreement, Ryan signaled for his team to present evidence they'd gathered overnight. Hidden cameras inside the dealership had captured countless instances of discriminatory behavior toward customers deemed not wealthy enough. Social media posts from disgruntled patrons poured in, confirming the pattern of elitism. The dealership owner arrived shortly afterward, panic-stricken. He pleaded with Ryan to spare his business, promising sweeping reforms. Ryan agreed, but only on one condition: the dealership must implement mandatory diversity and inclusion training for all employees and publicly apologize for their actions. Meanwhile, Emma watched the events unfold live on TV, stunned by what Ryan had done. She hadn't expected this level of support, let alone such a bold public statement. Tears streamed down her face as she realized how deeply Ryan believed in her and how far he was willing to go to defend her dignity. When Ryan returned home that evening, Emma greeted him at the door, speechless. For a moment, they simply stood there, holding each other. Then, breaking the silence, Emma whispered, "Thank you. No one's ever stood up for me like that before." Ryan kissed her forehead, his eyes soft with affection. "You don't need anyone to stand up for you, Emma. You're strong enough on your own. But I'll always be here to remind you of your worth." The next day, Emma returned to Prestige Motors not as a rejected customer, but as a respected guest. This time the staff greeted her warmly, offering apologies and compliments. As she browsed the showroom once again, she settled on a modest yet beautiful car that suited her perfectly. When the owner handed her the keys, he added, "Ms. Carter, we're truly sorry for how you were treated. Please know we're committed to doing better." Emma smiled faintly, accepting the gesture with grace. But as she drove away in her new car, she knew the real victory wasn't the vehicle, it was the lesson learned. Respect couldn't be bought or sold, it had to be earned. And thanks to Ryan, the world now understood that everyone deserved to be treated with dignity, regardless of their circumstances. From that day forward, Prestige Motors became known not for exclusivity, but for inclusivity. And Emma? She continued living her simple, joyful life, secure in the knowledge that love, kindness, and resilience could overcome even the harshest judgments.